Hi everyone, my name is James Spiteri, and today on the Elastic Community Conference, I'm here to talk to you about how I created my project Whichphish.com, which is essentially a platform that allows users to keep track of any potentially malicious certificates generated for very popular vendors used in phishing attacks like Apple, LinkedIn, PayPal, and so on. Really quick brief on, hey, what even is certificate transparency. This was introduced a few years ago as a mechanism to maintain a public log for every certificate that's signed by a certificate authority. A couple of years back, it was mandated, which means browsers do not accept certificates which do not have a public log, which is great, which means now that certificate transparency is pretty much enforced, anyone can go and search for any certificate they like in these logs. There's multiple services that allow you to do this, like this one, more of the more popular ones, crt.sh. And if you did a search like for Elastic, you can see every single certificate that was generated for Elastic. I should say signed by certificate authority for elastic.co. This means as a website owner or as a domain owner, I can see if, and I can keep track of what certificates are being signed for my domain, which means I can hopefully tell if there's any misuse of my domain, if there's anything suspicious going on, maybe my certificate authority got compromised, hopefully not, and I can keep track that way, which is great. So since there already exists multiple services, why create Whichphish? What I wanted to do really is create a service that allows users to look at the certificates potentially being used for phishing campaigns. When I say potentially being used, meaning they look very similar to a legitimate vendor, like, again, Apple, Gmail, Google Drive, LinkedIn, but there are some nuances in the naming which very likely means they're not legitimately being created by those vendors. And unfortunately, because now certificate authorities are free, certificate authorities are offering free certificates, which is amazing, which is great. That is being abused by malicious intent, trying to draw users to phishing landing pages and making them seem a bit more legitimate because they have that lock sign, right? As a general public, we've been told to trust that lock sign. So if you put in any information in a website which has that lock, it's supposed to be safe, right? I shouldn't have to worry about it. But that's obviously not the case all the time. Attackers know this, so they're generating certificates which look very close to something like an apple.com, like this one. So to the untrained eye, secure-apple.com looks like a very legitimate certificate. Why wouldn't I trust it? But in reality, it's not. And if you look at like google.com, which is legitimate, it looks totally fine. Also, there is hundreds of millions of certificates being generated and signed all the time. So if you look at my graph below, there's about between 200 and 300,000 certificates being signed every half hour, which is a lot. And you can see the vast majority is Let's Encrypt. So I wanted to create an easy way for people to consume this data. So I collect it, run some searches on it, aggregate it, and give it to the users to consume for indicators of compromise, put it in their SIM, whatever they want, just go to the Canvas workpad and view it that way, however they wish. So let's dive into the how. How did I build this? So first and foremost, if you haven't seen Whichphish, it's this, which is a nice Canvas workpad, which takes you to the different vendors. And I also offer an API, right? Just in case if you wanted to consume it that way. So the first thing I need is the data. There are multiple different certificate transparency logs. So to make my life a bit easier, I use this tool called SearchStream, which is created by CaliDog, which is essentially, I use the Python version here, but they have multiple different versions, I should say for different languages, that aggregates all the log sources together into one stream. And if you have never seen it run before, it's a lot of data, right? So if we run this live, you can see here, it's hundreds of certificates a second, which is a lot of data. So how do I collect it effectively? Of course, I'm going to be using the Elastic Stack for this. So my first source of entry, I use Logstash. I still use Logstash in this case. One of the few reasons I still use it, because I'm a big fan of Elastic Agent these days. And I use the pipe command. So the pipe command allows me to run a command like SearchStream and pipe all its output into a Logstash pipeline, which is perfect for what I need in this case, because SearchStream does support the JSON output. So I just grab that JSON, send it to Logstash, do some manipulation on the data, output it to Elasticsearch. I do have multiple instances of these Logstash pipelines running in several different servers. So I create my own document ID to avoid having duplicate entries in Elasticsearch. So that's how I get data in. And once, of course, it's in Elastic, I can search it like any other index. So you see, even just today, there's 7.1 million certificates, and it's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And you can see it looks like this once it hits Elastic. So, of course, I can create my Canvas workpad based off of that raw index, but that wouldn't be very efficient just because of the type of searches I'm running. They're very intensive, and over hundreds of millions of records, that could really impact performance. So what I do is I use what we call transforms. So transforms is a technology within the Elastic Stack that allows me to bubble up the latest occurrence of an entity, in this case, what we call the subject alternative name of certificate, based on my search. It also allows me to expire events from an index when they're no longer valid. So for example, when a certificate expires, I take it out of there. I don't want to show it to users anymore because it's effectively no longer browser trusted, hopefully. If we look at the transform itself, it's really easy, but you can also see sort of the searches I'm doing. So I'm doing pretty intensive wildcard searches. I'm doing fuzzy queries. I'm excluding some entities. I'm looking, removing certain certificate authorities from the list. But it's a pretty heavy search. But thanks to the transform, it's running periodically, grabbing the results from the query, sending them to another index, and then I have that retention policy, which means expire when the certificate is no longer valid. Which means now, when I go to create my Canvas workpad, you can see it here. This is the same Canvas workpad. I just query that transformed index because it writes the results to a new one, and it's pretty much doing a match all query. I just do it and chuck it in there, and it just displays all the results. So that's from the Elastic side. That's how I bring data in and apply it to the Canvas workpad. There is one bit of technology in front of all of this, so I don't just present my Elastic cluster to the world. Because for the first and main reason is I want to have my custom domain, whichphish.com. And secondly, it's good practice to put your service behind the CDN and get the protection of the CDN. In my case, I use Cloudflare. And particularly, I'm using Cloudflare Workers, which allows me to run code at the edge, or serverless, however you like to call it. Because I offer that API, I actually run my API all out of Cloudflare Workers, which is fantastic. So I don't have to maintain any reverse proxies. I don't have to maintain any other applications. I just run my worker, and Cloudflare takes care of the rest. I do some work with headers. That's the only other thing I do to get the name to work correctly, and that's it. So Cloudflare takes care of all of that. I have rate limiting, I have firewall rules, I have WAF. Everything's taken care of by Cloudflare. So if you hit my API, I get results back really, really quickly. And this is literally just hitting the worker. The worker is getting out of Elasticsearch. Thanks to that transform, I get the results really, really quickly. So that's it. That's all I wanted to talk to you about today. Hopefully you found it useful. If you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, LinkedIn, our community Slack, however you want. Please enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.